Yeah, we're live. 9:09 in the morning. Hopefully everybody's doing well. So AM edition of Let's Talk Tech. So today we're going to talk about, I have the thumbnail up of an individual runner intake manifold. This is kind of the quintessential design. You can see it, it's fairly obvious. This particular one was for a Honda B series testing that I did way back a decade or more ago. And the interesting thing about, as a little side story on this thing, the interesting thing is on this manifold, this was from the guys at TWM. And you can see it has all of the makings of the things that we associate with an individual runner manifold. We're going to talk about all of these and talk about what constitutes this, because the poll for today is going to be a change that I made to this, and did this change still make it an individual runner manifold? Because there are a couple of things that people think dictates that, and they have different definitions basically of what constitutes an individual runner manifold. So on this particular one, though, the backstory is that this is an IR manifold. We ran it on a Honda. This was on a B16, and this is the manifold that I eventually used to get this thing to make. I got one to make 211 or 212 horsepower at the tire in my Del Sol, from doing camshafts and ported head and headers and all kinds of things. But ultimately, the intake manifold, and more specifically, the injector position on the manifold, is what helped me get this. And this was one of the first tests I did with injector position and its effect on charge cooling and ultimately power production. So you can see, if you could see the thumbnail, I don't know if I have a, no, I can't really put it up on screen. You can see this has radiused air horns. It has individual blades in each of the runners, as opposed to having a single throttle body and a common plenum. And the injectors in this case are not all the way down at the port. They're up the runner a little bit, not all the way. What I did was made a slider assembly and mounted the injectors in front of the air horns. So out basically in front of the entry to each one of the ports. And after doing that, that improved charge cooling and allowed me to make more power. It picked up 10 or 11 horsepower or something. It was quite a bit from that change, which is a big, from a percentage standpoint, was a big amount. But here's my question, and this will be the poll for today, and I'll explain the poll so that everybody understands. If you take a look at the photo, you can see that the way that TWM sold this is they also sold this with an air box. So it has basically a flat plate that's bolted to all of the runners, and then you put the air horns on top of that, and it holds it in place. And then there's another lid that goes over it that has a single opening, and then you can what you can do, which is kind of cool and always a really good idea on any kind of race motor. A lot of guys use these on road race cars and stuff, and they work very well. Guys use them at Bonneville. Then the single opening on this lid, if you look at the top of like a high ram lid or those kinds of things, it looks like that. So it's a big lid that goes over it with a single opening, and then you can run a duct from that single opening over to a cold air source, because this one would have been mounted, in a Honda, would have been between the engine and the firewall. And if the hood's closed and stuff, not ideal for getting cold air, because and there's no filter in there either. But if you can run a duct over to some cold air source, obviously that works very well. I always recommend getting cold air to your motor. It's going to make more power. It's going to be happier. But here's the question. You can see that this is definitely, the photo is definitely an IR manifold. It has 4 individual runners. It has 4 throttle blades. It has 4 radiused air horns. It's open to the atmosphere. The question is, if I put the lid on this thing, and now it has a single opening, basically, there's no throttle body there. It still has 4 individual throttle bodies. If I put the lid on this, like the air cleaner lid on top of this, is it still an IR manifold? So that's going to be our poll for today. So that's what I want you guys to answer. If I install the lid on the IR manifold, If I install the lid on an IR manifold assembly with a single opening, is it still an IR manifold? So we'll see what you guys think about that. And then what we'll do is we will talk about that and figure out whether or not it is and what the difference is. Beverage. ITB, individual throttle body, individual runner, all of those are the same. So here's the discussion on the individual throttle body, or individual throttle body, individual runner, whatever. Because for a lot of people, the definition is, for me, this photo that I have of is definitely an IR manifold. It's definitely individual throttle body. It has an opening to the atmosphere. It has one blade for each cylinder that opens. You know, the blade is down close to the cylinder head, which people tell you that, hey, that's a, you know, you got instant throttle response. All of that's fantastic. Here's what happens when you put the lid on it, like I was talking about, with a single opening. And we're going to talk about two different conditions. One I did do and one I didn't do. So I put the lid on it with a single opening. Here's what that does. And here's why when you put the lid on there, I think it doesn't make it an individual throttle body or an individual runner manifold anymore. What happens when you put the lid on is the same thing that happens when you have a common plenum manifold. So if you think about a fast manifold or a Brian Tooley manifold or a Holley Hiram, theirs have a single throttle opening. You can have multiple throttle openings, but it has a big common plenum. And the thing that happens with a common plenum is with an IR manifold, you don't have Helmholtz resonance anymore. So Helmholtz resonance is a resonating frequency from the common plenum, let's say, but it's also part of the intake runner length and part of the runner and part of the cylinder head and when the valve is open, part of the cylinder displacement. What happens is all of that resonates at a certain frequency, and the frequency that resonates is dictated by how big it is. It resonates at a certain frequency, and that the resonation creates pressure waves, and pressure waves go down and can help cylinder filling. It's a very minor effect. It's the third most important of the three forms of charge filling associated with an intake manifold, in my opinion. But the thing is, with an individual runner manifold or an individual throttle body, and by the way, it doesn't have to be throttle bodies. It could be carburetors also, because like if you look at side drafts carburetors on like a Canon manifold on a 240Z, that's an IR manifold also. Individual blades, individual runners for each cylinder, and no common plenum. And you have when you have the IR manifold like the one that I showed on the Honda, there's no resonating frequency. It's the plenum volume becomes infinite basically because it's all space. It doesn't have a sealed plenum, and a lot of people think that okay, it has a single throttle opening. Okay, you can argue that as well, and for a lot of people, just the fact that it has one blade per cylinder, for them, that's what makes an individual throttle body or an individual runner manifold that has an individual throttle blade. Like if you think of a BMW M series motor, rather than a single throttle body with a single opening going into the common plenum, the plenum is open like this one would be, like this little Honda would be. And then they have an individual blade for each. So for a lot of guys, they call that, oh, that's an individual runner or an individual throttle body deal. Okay, and so you could, that description of that obviously is fairly accurate. But what they don't have, if they're just open to atmosphere like this photo was, they're just open to atmosphere, there's no Helmholtz resonance, there's no resonating frequency of a common plenum, because let's face it, it doesn't have a common plenum. If you put the lid over the one that I had, all of a sudden, in my opinion, it's not an individual runner manifold, because now it's a sealed common plenum manifold. And then if you were to take the throttle blades out of it, I guess, and put a big common throttle body on there, then it would just be a regular manifold, just like a P30 or Type R manifold or any of those. It would be that also. So does just the throttles, having throttle blades, individual throttle blades, make that thing an individual throttle body manifold? Does it make it an IR manifold? And like I said, if you don't have a common plenum on there, which we converted ours from a true IR open, open stack deal to a common plenum manifold, we changed the design of the manifold. And I remember talking to the guys at TWM about this. I'm like, well, I know that you have this common plenum, which is a good idea so that you could route air to it and all that's good. I understand that. I said, but you're fundamentally changing the design of the manifold. And how does that affect power? So those are all good tests. And then how does it affect power if we change the size of that and the shape and all that? That's all like really cool stuff, because changing that shape can change power and stuff. And you have to go in and work on your individual combination, I think, to optimize that. It wouldn't just be a universal thing. I mean, there are some universal absolutes that bigger does one thing, smaller does another thing, but it's also dependent on cam timing and stuff. There's a lot of things going on there. But if you apply a common plenum to that IR type manifold, you've added Helmholtz resonance, and sometimes it does nothing. Sometimes it does a little bit. I've never seen it actually do a lot. We have seen it hurt power, because the other instances where I've run this and transformed common plenum manifolds with Helmholtz resonance to an IR manifold, I've done it a couple of times. I did it before on the FR500 manifold that I had. I showed you guys that the other night, where it has two different runner lengths. And basically what they have is a blade in there, the throttle blades, that they open up. So instead of the air curving around into the long runner section, now it just draws air from the short runner section. The cool thing about that is it has a removable lid. So while we're making a run, or even before, as soon as we go to wide open throttle, we have those blades open, and then we just remove the lid. And when we remove the lid, now it's not drawing through the common plenum and the throttle body that's mounted in front of that. It's just drawing from the open atmosphere. And that did pick up power. It liked not only did it like the short runner length, obviously at the top of the RPM range, because that's what happens with runner length, but it also liked that over having a common plenum. And it didn't seem to be just airflow going through the other throttle body, because the other throttle was big enough to support much more power. So it seemed to be that, and we saw this later on when I did it with an LS also. We did it with the carbon PTR or TR intake manifold that they have. They had an adjustable manifold, which would eventually become a design for one of the fast manifolds. They had this carbon PTR or whatever that had a removable plenum, and it had a big single throttle body mounted in front of it. And then you could adjust stacks inside of it. And what we did, as always, is we just went to wide open throttle, and then we just pulled the plenum off, and then all of a sudden, voila, it is a individual runner, non-common plenum, IR kind of manifold. And when we did that, it did the same thing that it did on the Ford. It also picked up power. So it seems like not having the plenum there in both of those cases, and in the case of the Honda as well, that it seemed to like that for power production, like that even more. And that's something that the common plenum definitely does change power, and does introduce this Helmholtz resonance. And maybe, I guess maybe an argument could be made that there's obviously a lot more flow, because now you're flowing all the air through. If you look at the size of a single blade in each one of those ports flows enough to support the power level easily of the airflow needed by the motor. And maybe that's simply an airflow thing, but I'm pretty sure that it's also this resonance frequency thing. We're definitely changing that as well. It's not just we're getting more air in. It's pretty cool though. So that's my discussion for today. I want to see what's going on with the poll right now. Wow. If I install the lid on the manifold assembly with a single opening, is it still an IR manifold? So we're still at like about 50-50. We're at 52% saying yes and 48% saying no. So, and this is a thing for a lot of guys, just the individual throttle body is just solely just the blade. But like I said, we did change the design of the manifold by having a lid on that and having it be a single opening. And more importantly than that, like you could have multiple openings. You could have an opening on one side, opening on the other side, openings in the middle or whatever. But as long as it had a common plenum, then you would have that resonating frequency. And I wonder how many holes you'd have to have in the thing before it would transition to not having it essentially. Okay. So let's, I'll see if I can get to some questions. It's why we do airbox mods to accommodate the individual carbs on street. Newer bikes even have telescoping runners. The telescoping runners will definitely change power. On most older Hondas where the plenum is located near the firewall and the high pressure area at the base of the windshield can be used to fill the plenum. Yeah, it's a good air source. And that cowl induction's been used, since the 50s. Saw some Viper engine testing where they pulled the lid on the intake manifold off mid pull. That's what we did on the dyno with both the FR500 and the LS version. I didn't know that the lid was bolted on a Viper intake manifold, though. I thought that they were solid. Pretty much all modern four-cylinder motorcycles use individual throttle bodies, trumpets inside the airbox, standoff injectors. Yeah, on bikes and some bikes I think use dual injectors, but having them in the air horn definitely works. Old Preludes had dual throttle path for HELMHOLTZ. Same engine was used in Formula 3, individual throttle, standoff injector with carbon bullet chambers. So the new poll is French fries or tater tots. I guess technically had a common plenum with a rain tray. If it was sealed, it is, but if it's just a cover, then it's not. Oh, Socrates, it wasn't a stock Viper manifold. Okay. Off topic, but whose car burned up with a Skyram on it? I don't know. Did something happen with the Skyram? The Skyrim has really long, obviously. Oh no, because the injectors are still down at the bottom. The test that I wanted to do with the Skyram is I wanted to put injectors at the top of it, and then also I wanted to run boost on it. Newest Corvette manifold is a hybrid dual to single plane manifold. It's a long runner, short runner. It would be a better thing. Butterflies in the plane that allows switch volume on demand. Dual plane for low rev, single plane. Yeah, dual plane, single plane are carbureted manifold, so it's not that. What they're doing is, and it's been used for a long time, is they could change. And Ferrari's been doing this in a lot of their stuff for a long time. Also, is you have a butterfly valve between two. You have like a dual plenum manifold with two throttle bodies, and then you have a connection tube between them. And this is something I did back when I was doing the 2-valve stuff also. You run a connector for the 2 plenums, and then you run a throttle blade in there, and that's what I did. I just ran a throttle body basically in between them so that you could open and close it. And whether it's open or closed changes power at specific RPMs. And I've talked about this many times, like on the PI, the intake manifold for the 4.6 2-valve truck, they use that also. They just had a divider in between that they open and close, but it only had an effect on power at very low engine speeds. I haven't seen it be real effective, but obviously the GM engineers are much better at designing their stuff than this fairly simple thing that I did. And that can work. It can definitely change the power. And the changing the connection between 2 plenums has less of an effect on power than changing actual runner length. Just watched a video of a car running and it caught fire. Uh-oh. The guys at Ecotec dyno tested that already. Are you going to do any more K24 testing? Yeah, we're definitely going to. K20A3 is a shorter manifold. Shorter than what? I saw the Skyrim was put on Amelia's car that she did. I just saw her they were doing an install thing or whatever. Oh, it had a fuel leak and caught fire. Uh-oh, that's not good. Remember those intake manifold gaskets with screen mesh on them? Yeah, I do. And they were supposed to increase torque and mileage. I'd be surprised if that happened. That might be one of the things that I should test. I know that they used to use those on. I thought guys used them on the blower manifolds. I think it will shift RPM, peak power RPM higher. A short runner makes power higher than a long one. I think the SCAT 6.4 uses the low high RPM. The Hemi has dual runner intake manifolds. The later versions of the 5.7 that the guys at Ecotec have that I think belongs to Holly or one of those guys. It's a later one and it makes good power. They did a camshaft change on it, but it also has a dual runner intake manifold, which does what you would think the long runners make power down low, and then the short runners make more power up top, and it works pretty well. The screen mesh was used for fire protection, for backfires or something. You should do some testing on the Mopar 426 cross ram manifold. I've seen the cross ram manifolds. The guys at Ecotec have run those. The one that I want to run is the big long sonic ram. I think I'm just going to build my own. Don, I think we went over the definition thing on this. An individual throttle body is not the same as an individual runner manifold in terms of what the design is, because if you put a box over that, it now has a resonating frequency, which it doesn't if you don't have that. Is an intercooler with the inlet and outlet on the same side as effective as if they were on opposite sides? I was just thinking about that today. I would like to actually flow test that design, because I was thinking about the intercooler that I have that I run on almost everything. And I was thinking about where the turbo is going to be and where the inlet is going to be for this big bang test on the 3800. And I was wondering if that, with the same basically, if we had the same intercooler core and the same end tanks and the same size inlet and outlet, but if it has to flow in and then go back out versus flipping this end tank the other way and having it go in and then out, do we have better flow like that? And also, if we have better flow, are we using less of the core? Are we making it less efficient by doing that? Will an air filter cause resonating frequency if it covers all four runners? I don't know about what you mean by the filter. The filter element itself is not the same thing as having a common box connecting all of them. The O3 Cobra intake has almost no runner length. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't. It's not good. I have a test that I did where we ran the like an 01 Cobra manifold, the one that they use on all the NA ones. And then we ran, Vortec had basically just a common plenum that they bolted, that they could attach the O3 intercooler to, and then use the factory lower manifold and blow into that. So we ran that, and then we ran the Vortec blowing into the factory long runner manifold, and there's definitely a difference in power between the long runner manifold is way better through the basically whole RPM range. I'd love to see a discussion on D series roller rockers used in performance builds. Do they make aftermarket roller rockers for a D series? Are those like the ones that they have, the VTech Eliminator B series ones? Donovan, I've seen the video where the guy had the GoPro inside his intake manifold. It's very cool. I remember an old Chrysler long cross ram ad, they were calling it. It does have a supercharging effect. That's what you're talking about. When I was talking about the three different designs, or the three different forms of charge filling associated with an intake manifold, that's what's happening. Is the long runners have a reflected wave, just like this pressure wave that I was talking about with the Helmholtz resonance. The long runner has a pressure wave that goes up and back, and if it arrives at the right point, and it's irrespective of like the airflow that's going through, because when the piston goes down, it draws air in. That happens. But these other things that are happening are in addition to that, and that's why you get better power production. I have a YouTube link for a GoPro inside an airbox. I've seen that. I've seen the super thing. It's very cool. D15Z1 engines have them. A D15Z1 is a VX engine. The Cobra engineers must have intended to rev it to 12,000 RPM. Yeah, the short runner stuff in the blower is very, very common, but it has nothing to do with where they think that the effective engine speed is based on runner length. That's all just more packaging. If you look at all of the 671 blower manifolds and stuff, all of those are very, very short. And they do that because they know that they do it to fit. I mean, it's just got to fit. And so there's only so much room that you can do with in terms of runner length and blower packaging to fit under the hoods, especially of a late model kind of car, something that's not a truck or has a hood scoop on it. But if you can only package it a certain way, then you have to do that. And also that they know going in that, because even with the short runners, which would lose power through most of the RPM range, they're going to have a blower that adds lots of immediate boost, and they're going to have enough low speed torque is what they're thinking. The VX valve train fits the D16Y6 and D16Y8 head castings without an issue. I think if there's any hint of runner at the bottom of the manifold, the air will be drawn in. If there's an opening, air will get drawn in, but it still is not going to make power the way it will with a long runner manifold because it doesn't have that reflected wave. We specialize in motorcycle ITB fuel injection methanol conversions. A single oval filter with a plate over the top has power curve change when running with or without the filter installed. Wish an aftermarket company would make a low-profile intercooled intake manifold similar to the LSA for us guys who want to keep their factory hood with the turbo LS. So you want the intercooler packaged in the intake manifold? And why couldn't you keep your factory hood with a turbo LS? If you ran a fast manifold or a factory manifold, or do you just want the intercooler in the manifold also? Yeah, with a typical front mount, or you can even, I know the gentleman that brought the Turbo 8.1 had an air to water, and it was just packaged nicely right to the side of the motor in the engine compartment, and that worked out good. My Gen 1 Insight has long intake runners to focus on low RPM. That's the way that you would want it to be. Do you think the Predator variable Venturi carburetor is actually effective or a gimmick? I've never tested a Predator carb, but a variable Venturi carburetor in theory should work very well. I just haven't. I don't know about the. Like I said, I've never run a Predator to see if it performs like it should. If you ran individual runners, but also with individual charge pipes to each runner, yeah, then if you had pipe length connected to each one of those, that would become the runner length. If there's no break in it or no dramatic step up in size change, that would be the runner length. It'd be really long. Then it would be a Skyram. Buenos Aires, what's up? I'm going to test the chili bomb. As a matter of fact, I'll run it on the 3800. Probably would be the first time it runs. What are the temps in the runners? That depends on a lot of things. It depends on the ambient air or the temperature of the air that you have being drawn into it. And then also if you're changing that in any manner, that's why we get good gains from having the injector out in front of the air horn, because we're changing the charge temperature. Have you ever tested one of those SV1 carbs? I have not. I've seen those. They look interesting, though. The flying toilet, yep. For me, it's a matter of pressure differential. I don't know what your comment is referring to. Getaways in the house. I'm excited about running the chili bomb. I was disappointed that I didn't run it the last time I was down there. Build a Skyram for the 8.1. See how much low RPM torque you could make. It would be cool. And I think that would be not too hard to do. I need to look and see what's underneath that. I'm thinking about just doing a big, long, like Sonic Ram style manifold. Then you almost have to do that for some kind of Dodge, right? Are there diminishing returns on runner length? If you made a runner length 5 feet long, would it make it won't do it at idle, because Tom's question is, are there diminishing returns on runner length? What if you made the runner length 5 feet long? Would it make a boatload of power at idle? No, it won't. The the thing is, it will only do that at wide open throttle. So I guess you could keep doing that and have the reflected wave arrive at a few hundred RPM. Like on a, maybe I would be curious to see doing that on diesel applications. But if you look at the Skyram, once they release all the dyno testing videos on it and stuff, even that didn't make the torque where I thought it was going to. You need a cab over Dodge van with a Skyram and a blower on the roof. There you go. Cross ram should be a Chrysler, maybe the Magnum. The Magnum would work, although the problem with the Magnum is the reason why I want to do it on a Hemi is because it's easier. There's no, I don't have to make a valley cover and stuff for it. I know I want to see the, I need to get the Omni. I'm thinking about just putting any kind of stock running motor in the Omni just to get it running and driving around while I'm doing the engine testing. Saw a fellow YouTuber put a 500 horsepower heads and cam LS in a Pacer. I do like Pacers, and I like Gremlins too. For a burnout car, would you have opted to build up a similar powered AMC V8 or do the LS? The LS swap would be easier for me to do because we have lots of those. I don't really see too many AMCs in the wrecking yard. I haven't run, Sean, if you're asking if I've run nitromethane on anything, I haven't done that. Hughes makes the valley cover for a Magnum. Do you remember the Omni from hell with a 426? I don't remember that. Did somebody made it into a rear-wheel drive deal? I've seen a clear valley cover from Hughes. I like those. I do want to do a clear oil pan, which I think would be awesome. Hooker used to make a Buick 231 swap for a Chevette. I have one of those old swap books that have all of those old common swaps. You know, the 350 and the Datsun Z and the Vega stuff and glass exhaust manifolds. That actually would be cool. I think you'd have to have pretty high temperature stuff, but the one that I liked is there's a YouTube video up of the guy that did the clear cylinder head on the motorcycle, and then eventually it got so hot that it just pushed the spark plug out of the threads because he was running it for a fairly long time. But it was cool to be able to see down in there, and because he also had a cover over the side plate too, so you could see what's going on, see the oil going on in there. But the cylinder head thing was very cool because you could see the fire down in the combustion. It was kind of awesome. I've seen the Russian channel too. That they do some really cool stuff. Is it possible to use the Ford M90 case on a GM lower to be able to use the air-to-air intercooler? Maybe. I'm sure that you could package that somehow. The problem is you're still stuck with an M90. It would be cool until the very first backfire, then it'd be glass shrapnel. Yeah, but that's why you're in the other room behind the bulletproof glass. Transparent aluminum. I thought transparent aluminum was only available in the Star Trek movies. I always wanted to do a cooking show using the exhaust. A see-through two-stroke. I think this was a two-stroke motor that he was running. I still want to try an M90 on the V6 Magnum barrel intake manifold. Mill off the top and make an adapter plate for the supercharger. So there actually is transparent aluminum. So Scotty was right. So if you go back and look at the show, they traveled back through time and then gave the guy the design for transparent aluminum, gave him the formula, and then he came up with it. And so that's probably what happened, right? That's right. How do we know he didn't invent the thing? Exactly. And the people that were doing research for that probably may have known something. A K24 in an old Mini would be good. A K24 actually in an Omni is what I would want to do. Do any of you guys know how fast you can rev a 292 Ford wide block with the original solid lifters? That would have less to do with the motor or even the lifters than it does to have to do with other things. Valve train would be the big thing. Have ever played around with the supercharged V6 Thunderbirds? Are they comparable to a GM when boosted? I don't know about the rest of the motor. I've only run a few of those on the engine dyno, and I did see 2 of them in one day at the wrecking yard, which I thought was amazing. But I haven't played with the cylinder heads or camshafts or things like that for them. Question: when I build a hot side for a 6-liter and S475 to run 2.5-inch tubing or 3-inch, either one of those will work. The Y pipe that we have that I run on the engine dyno for everything is 2.5, and it works fine. I've also run 3-inch stuff, and it works. There's you won't see any difference in power between those two things. You might see a difference in a little bit of a difference in response, although I don't even know about that, judging by how short they are. I don't know that you would see that. Ultimately, the flow rate of the turbo is probably going to be the restrictive thing. It's actually an aluminum-based ceramic, but they call it transparent aluminum because of Star Trek. That's even better. I have even more respect for them. K-swap Omni could be great. I'm going to swap a Saturn SC one day. That would be good. I can find an M90 for $55 at my local pick and pull. There's a lot of those in all the front wheel drive Grand Prix and stuff. There's usually a bunch of them at the wrecking yard. Someone I follow has a side-mounted M90 on a Z-Tech mounted longitudinally in a Focus. It's a rear-wheel drive. Wow, that's a big change. So it's plumb like a centrifugal supercharger. It's not. There are lots of remote-mounted positive displacement superchargers, and it's certainly possible to do that. You just put it off to the side. The guys that run at Bonneville put them in front, obviously, and then you can blow through an intercooler and stuff. All you do is just the outlet of the blower just goes into some kind of tube and into into an intercooler. I think it ultimately would be better just to put an air to water core underneath it, and it's shorter and it probably packages a little bit easier, but all of that works. What your Focus turbo model? Did you keep the turbo? First gen Focus, there wasn't a turbo model in the US. That's right. I mean, none of those E-Tech motors were turbocharged. Maybe only the later stuff. So let's see how our poll is doing. If I install the lid on the IR manifold assembly with a single opening, is it still an IR manifold? 53% saying yes, it is. They usually, I've seen divorce mount M90s and Fieros too. They usually mount the AC compressor and put the M90 there. They can put it off to the side. Jackson made a supercharger for the SVT Focus. Yeah, they had them for the Zetec stuff too. I had one on my Focus. I had a 2000 and I don't know, 3 or 4 maybe, I think, that I did the book that I wrote on Focus performance, and did a lot of stuff with Oscar. And we put the bigger supercharger on there. I think he was running was he running M45s on that, or M62s, and then we put an M90. We put ever what the upgrade one was. I think he was using 45s on them, and then we put the 62 because he used the 62 on the SVT is what I'm remembering. Getting ready to put an LS1 in my truck, a sloppy best cam, ported 243s, Holley mid-rise, and air-to-water intercooler sandwiched in the intake. So you have a mid-rise with an intercooler in it? The Focus RS in the UK, yeah, they got a lot of cool stuff in other parts of the world, but not here. I've got a 17 Malibu with a turbo. Any idea on how to make it more fun? It should already be fun, right? Just turn the boost up. '90s SCCA GT2. We ran 968 3-liter with 50mm side draft Webers and had a few length trumpets. Was in a plenum box fed by a 4-inch hose with a K&N cone filter. Nice. The 968 3-liters needed, was the 968 a 3-liter? Was that a 2-valve head or was it a 4-valve head? And then obviously it needed boost. Never seen any mods on a GM 2-liter turbo. There's lots of those, right? That's an Ecotec motor. AJ, yeah, the guy that built the twin M90 351 was Mike Setar, I think, did that. It definitely works. Can you mount the M90s upside down? Will they still oil the? Will it still oil the gears? I think it'll still be in an oil bath even if it's upside down, right? Would there be any other problem to mounting them upside down? That's how I wanted to mount them, was upside down, and then they feed into a common plenum. Oh, the 80s GM 2-liter. That was the Sunbird one? Those are hard to find. Tyler, you can mount them upside down? Because then that way they could, rather than having to package them both on top of like a high ram, they could mount to the side of the high ram and blow up into the high ram on an LS application. I am going to do the Big Bang K series. Yeah, the K24. As a matter of fact, I need to get a hold of the guys over at Skunk about that. Skunk 2, the Deuce. So our poll is still split. 54% saying yes. I wonder if my poll should be, am I ever going to get a poll that's 100% one way or the other? Guy has it upside down on a 3800 performance going into an intercooler and then back into the lower intake. 4 valve, 944, 2.5, 968, 3 liter, 2.5 floating cylinders, 3 liter Siamese. Not very good head sealing. Don't like a lot of compression or boost, but the heads can be ported to flow big numbers. So is the 968 a 4 valve? The 3 liter one? Well, for the poll, it just like I said, people have their definition of what they think. For me, an IR manifold is one that doesn't have a common plenum. That's how I dictated. The where the throttle blade is not, it doesn't matter to me, because the difference is that you can have individual throttle blades on it and have a common plenum, and it will act like a common plenum manifold. It won't act like an individual runner one without a common plenum. Those are all different things, but that's just me. That's just one man's opinion. But as we know, it's absolute. Yeah, Maurice, that's a good point. So the question is, could we make the common plenum big enough to where it still acts like there's no common plenum? And if you look at, he was bringing up Formula One stuff, and if you look at Formula One, the amount of development that they put in the airbox is amazing, like with everything else. I've seen blowers. Someone's asking about mounting a blower sideways. I've seen that done way back in the day. Sprintex had a twin screw supercharger, which is probably a auto rotor or something, maybe back then. That might have been before Kenny Bell. They had one that they mounted to the side, like where the air conditioning or something is, over to the side, and then ran it into the thing. And so that one could do that. But I don't know on the gearing. The oiling for the gears would be the concern. Keglet on version 2.v2, yeah. What happens with Helmholtz effect when you do rammer? Nothing. It has no effect on it, and pressure has no effect on it either. It's just a resonating volume. It's a resonating frequency of that plenum volume. When you excite something, think about when you hit a drum. When you hit a drum, whatever size drum is will dictate what kind of noise it makes. That's what's happening. That's what Helmholtz resonance is. When you excite it, everything, we all do, everything does. We resonate at a certain frequency. The Mazda Millennia twin screw, yep. GMC blowers are mounted on the side of two-stroke diesels. That's right. It's all good stuff. Is this still on from last night? Yeah, it's just, I do need to do a 24-hour one. Hope a Buick 3.8 turbo, like a Grand National one. I don't see too many of those in the wrecking yards. I've seen a Jeep 4-liter with a Ford M90 mounted sideways. Matthew, would you be up for a collaboration if I sent you an Ecotec 1.8 liter and a GT45? I don't have a way to run an Ecotec. I don't know what bell housing it is or any of that. I've never run one. But I can go get an Ecotec from the wrecking yard if and I already have GT35 and GT30 turbos here already, and even a smaller one than that. I think I have a real Garrett GT20 or 25. That way you wouldn't have to ship anything. People want me to do the Ecotec stuff, but I haven't ever run one. In theory, only one gear needs oil. That's right. Richard, what modern intakes would fit a 265 small block Chevy cross ram? All of those should bolt up to a 265. that's still a small block Chevy. I think they all use the same intake manifold. When do we get a tour of your part stash in a home garage? I don't have stuff here at the garage. That my storage area would be the one where you want to do that. Blowing through an EFI big block Chevy manifold must make nice torque. The one that Freiberger did, he did put the blower on top of a tunnel ram, and that works really well. Much better than running that blower on a traditional, very short runner blower style manifold. Those don't work as well. They just don't have any runner length. Richard, how much compression or would you lose using a 20cc wide-scope piston as opposed to a flat top? That's going to be -5 or 6. Also, how much is one point of compression is worth about 3 to 4% in power on an NA motor. And 20 cc's would, if you lost 20 cc's, you would lose almost 2 points. But what you should go do, and you could play with this as much as you want, go to Wallace Racing compression calculator, and you can plug in all the information that you want, and it will tell you everything. And Wallace Racing also has displacement calculators. He has calculators for everything. It's the go-to thing for figuring stuff out like that. Matthew, plenty of the, yeah, there's plenty of the Ecotec motors at the wrecking yards. I see those. I've seen them in Cobalts and Skies, or the yeah, that's right. I've seen the turbocharged versions and the blower versions. I think I've only ever seen one complete one that was there. But I think the ones we have are 2-liter versions. Racer, I spent some time in a dyno and supercar shop in Australia. These were LS engines with IR intakes. They would hold the engine at, say, 6,000 RPM. With the rheostat, they would trim the fuel curve by the fuel standoff. They weren't trimming the fuel with an air fuel meter. My grandma's 2016 Focus is a 2-liter turbo. Yeah, they introduced those later on, but the OG Zetec stuff was not. The hottest one that we had back then was the SVT one. Had a fancy dual runner intake and everything. And then turbo versions of those were kind of cool, because unfortunately with the Jackson Racing Supercharger that they put on those back in the day, you had to get rid of the dual runner intake manifold. Do you see future muscle car swaps with Ecotec or EcoBoost 4-cylinders that make the same power and save gas, or millennial snowflakes? so everybody that's in that age group is a snowflake? I don't think that's the case. I think we want to get people into this industry. Going to use those to keep the hobby going. I think you're seeing those. I've seen those Ecotecs put in Fieros and stuff, and that's a really good combination. They make good power. But I think as long as you have, people like the swaps that they like, and so guys are putting, Hemis in the kind of Mopar cars and putting LSs in basically everything. And so putting a big motor in a lightweight car is very easy. Obviously, guys are already doing Honda swaps and stuff. I don't know how popular the Ecotec thing will be. Matthew, take a look at my channel on the engine model I'm talking about. It's an NA engine. The 1.4s have a lot of aftermarket support. It's the 1.8 2HO or the F18D4. I'll have to take a look at those. I'm not fluent on Ecotec stuff. I like the smaller displacement stuff. Those are kind of cool. And there probably are, I probably would find more NA versions of that motor, and I don't care about starting with an NA version. You need to check out the LNF Fiero YouTube. Okay, I can take a look at that. We've had a couple of those come into Westech on the chassis dyno. Just here holding her down. That's funny. Part of the GM Opel division. The Buick 215 I'm building has cross ram 8 throttle body. That would be cool. I think I saw somebody just did the retrospective on the aluminum Buick, or somebody just sent me information on it. If you look at the GM put a lot of money into the Ecotec stuff for sport compact car racing, and they were making, I think, 14 or 1500 horsepower with those. So obviously there's a lot that can be done when you apply yourself. There's plenty of potential in it, in you know, in a 2-liter 4-valve combination. I don't know how well those heads flow. I don't know if they have Honda kind of flow numbers. Yeah, Matthew, it wouldn't surprise me if the fastest 4-cylinder is a 2-liter Ecotec. I'm sure you're thinking about a drag race application, right? Like I said, I remember seeing some stuff that Roush did on those at one of the events I went to, and it, you know, they've got giant sized turbos on them and stuff. That one even had some kind of version of a turbo 400 trans attached to it, if I remember right. Which was, you know, if you have that kind of power, you need that kind of trans. Racer, what class did he run that Ecotec in? I mean, you know, like we've talked about, if you apply yourself to any of those 4-cylinder stuff, you look at what the boosted boys are doing with, you know, K series stuff and any of those things. If you're starting out with a motor that makes 300 or more NA horsepower, then you know, you start multiplying that out at the boost levels that the guys are talking about, and that's how you get to be 1400 horsepower or more. Ported Ecotec heads are showing 270. That's enough to go fast. Low 6s in the quarter. That's pretty fast. So around yours is making 400 or so at 24 pounds. Those are good numbers. 2 more minutes. Donovan, the aftermarket should already be there for the 2016 models. Isn't that an Ecotec? I mean, a Duratec motor? Isn't that what the late model Focus is? That there should already be stuff for that. Richard, have you ever driven a car with one of the old B&M clutch turbo 400s? I haven't. Maurice, I just realized Westech is an hour away. I may need to get with the program and see what all can be done with the D15Z1 valve train roller rocker swapped into it. So why do you, is there a problem that you're thinking that you can't rev the D16 engine without having the roller valve train in it? And you won't be able to run that there unless you go to a chassis dyno, because you can't run a reverse rotation motor on the dyno anymore. You could with the 901, but not with the 902. It's a directional vane. Unfortunately, I ran a lot of B series. I don't think I ever ran a D series on the engine dyno. I ran a lot of B series stuff way back when they had the 901. They even built the adapter plates and stuff necessary. It was very great. I ran a lot of NA stuff and turbocharged stuff. We ran B16s and B18s, and then the Bonneville motor was near a B20. What injector should I run with a CTM8 melting camshaft? I don't know what that is. The injector is not going to be determined by the camshaft. The injector is going to be determined by what the power output is. So if you're making 400 horsepower, you need to have fuel to support 400 horsepower or 500 or 600 or whatever the number is. And then always go over, don't get just enough to support that. The injector flow rate times 16 will give you a real good idea on how much power it will support. So if you have a 50-pound injector, you can support 800 horsepower. It's 100 horsepower per cylinder, basically. I know that the Cobalt's not a reverse rotation. He was talking about a Honda. That's why I made that comment. He was talking about a D series Honda, which is a reverse rotation, just like the B series. Anything that can be done with a power shift transmission and the late model Focus? That's the only thing I really hate about it. I don't know anything about that trans. Mostly looking to take advantage of the roller rockers to maximize ramp rates. So are there, I'm just asking because I don't know, are there problems with the ramp rates of cams that are available with because I've never heard of anybody having a problem with making power with D series and wanting to go to those roller rockers. It'd be interesting to see if there was any frictional change, or if, like you're talking about, you could get wilder cam grinds to work with those. Is this an NA motor that you're doing? Because if it's a turbo motor, then I certainly wouldn't worry about what you're worried about. And one more minute. Oh, I didn't know that happened with Fiestas and Focuses. They knowingly sold faulty dual clutch transmissions. 225 slant 6. I do have one of those. It was broke, unfortunately, but I think it's fixed now. Joe, I think I already answered your injector question. If you put a cam in it, you're going to need something bigger than stock injectors. So you could go up to some other bigger injector. Maurice, have you tried any other cams in there? Andy, what are you doing? You're late. I'm just about to sign off, but welcome. Thanks, Matthew. Thanks for all the comments. Big Bang injector test to see how much power we can make with the wrong size injector. I have tried to push. I remember trying to do that on 24-pound injectors with Ford stuff, seeing how far we could go. But just ended up turning the fuel pressure up and stuff. I know that you could run a supercharged 5-liter Mustang engine, a modified one with a cam and ported heads and a Vortec on it with 24-pound injectors and an FMU and over 100 pounds of fuel pressure in the Silver State for half an hour. Uh-oh, getting pizza for the NASCAR race. And on that note, we're going to close out. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'm going to close out our poll, which ended up at 47% saying no and 53% saying yes. Is it still an IR manifold? Once again, thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you guys all tonight. I'm working on the big block Chevy 900 horsepower combinations, including one of those is an NA motor. It was a 565 that I did with a tunnel ram and, two 1050s like you do. Thank you guys. I'll see you tonight.